The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been going on for 6 hours. Representatives from 47 different species sat in the Great Chamber, their voices creating a symphony of worry and fear. At the center of it all floated a holographic display showing the outer rim of the galaxy, where 3 star systems had simply vanished from all sensors. Ambassador Kethvar of the Centauri Union stood at the speaking platform, his blue skin pale with exhaustion. "The reports are confirmed," he said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "The Helix system is gone. Not destroyed, not damaged, gone. Every planet, every moon, every asteroid. Nothing remains but empty space." A collective shudder ran through the assembly. The Helix system had been home to over 2 billion beings. Now it was as if it had never existed. "How is this possible?" asked Representative Zara from the Aquarian Federation, her gills fluttering with anxiety. "Our best scientists cannot explain this phenomenon." Dr. Moleth, the chief science advisor, activated another hologram. This one showed surveillance footage from the edge of the Helix system, recorded just before contact was lost. The image was grainy and distorted, but it clearly showed something moving through space. It looked like a living shadow, flowing from planet to planet like a dark river. "We believe this is connected to ancient records found in the archives of Veltar," Dr. Moleth explained. "References to something called the Void Swarm. The texts describe it as an ancient force that devours not just matter, but the very fabric of space itself." Elder Thyman of the Keeper Council raised his crystalline hand. "Those are myths. Stories told to frighten children. The Void Swarm is legend, not reality." "Legends based on truth," Dr. Moleth replied firmly. "The patterns match. The way entire systems simply vanish. The complete absence of any debris or radiation signatures. This entity doesn't destroy. It consumes and absorbs everything into itself." The chamber fell silent. Every being present understood what this meant. If the Void Swarm was real and if it was moving through their galaxy, then no world was safe. "What of the Etherians?" asked Ambassador Kethvar. "They were the closest to the affected systems." Dr. Moleth's expression grew grim. "We received their last transmission 3 days ago. They reported seeing the darkness approaching their outer colonies. Since then, nothing. The Etherians were one of the most peaceful species in the galaxy. They were beings of living crystal, who communicated through beautiful harmonic frequencies. Their worlds were places of art and music where violence was unknown. The thought of them facing something like the Void Swarm made even the hardest military commanders feel sick. "We must send help," declared General Voss of the Terran Defense Alliance. "Our fleets can reach the Etherian systems in 12 days. 12 days may be too late," Dr. Moleth warned. "Based on the speed of the swarm's advance, the main Etherian worlds have perhaps 8 days before the entity reaches them." Commander Brixtell of the Corvan Empire stood up. His armored form was imposing, but his voice carried deep concern. "My fleet could reach them in 10 days, but we would arrive with insufficient force to make a difference. This enemy has consumed entire star systems. What can conventional weapons do against such power?" "There is one possibility," said Ambassador Kethvar quietly. "The newest members of our council, the humans from Earth." The chamber erupted in discussion. The humans had only been part of the Galactic Council for 10 years. Their species was young, violent, and unpredictable. Many council members still questioned whether they should have been allowed to join at all. "The humans are barbarians," spat Representative Zell from the Highborn Collective. "They solve every problem with violence and destruction. What could they possibly do that our civilized fleets cannot? They are the only ones close enough," Ambassador Kethvar replied. "Human space borders the Etherian territories. Their fastest ships could reach the affected area in 4 days." General Voss, who had worked with human forces before, nodded slowly. "The humans have proven themselves capable fighters. Their methods are unconventional but effective." "Unconventional is a kind way to put it," muttered Elder Thyman. "They fight wars like wild animals. No honor, no restraint, no respect for the rules of civilized combat." "Perhaps that is exactly what we need," said Dr. Moleth. "An enemy that consumes entire star systems cannot be fought with conventional tactics. Maybe we need someone willing to fight without rules." The debate continued for another hour. Some representatives argued that humans were too dangerous to trust with such an important mission. Others pointed out that the Etherians would be dead in 8 days if no one helped them. Finally, Ambassador Kethvar called for silence. "We will vote," All in favor of requesting human assistance? The vote was close, but it passed. 24 species voted yes. 23 voted no. Within an hour, the emergency transmission was sent to Earth. The message was simple and desperate. Ancient evil has awakened. 3 star systems consumed. Etherian worlds under threat. Request immediate military assistance. Time critical. Peaceful species facing extinction. The response came back in just 30 minutes. It was short and direct. Message received. Fleet deploying. Expect arrival in 4 days. Prepare the Etherians for our methods. Many council members wondered what that last line meant. The humans had a reputation for brutal efficiency in warfare, but surely they would show restraint when protecting innocent civilians. 3 hours after the human response, another transmission arrived. This one came from the Etherian homeworld, transmitted on their emergency frequency. The message was filled with static and interference. But the harmonic voice of an Etherian elder came through clearly. To any who hear this, the voice sang with desperate beauty. The darkness approaches our worlds. We have watched it swallow the light of distant suns. Our people are afraid. We are not warriors. We know nothing of violence or war. We are scholars and artists, singers and dreamers. The transmission paused, filled with the sound of what could only be weeping, though Etherians wept in musical tones that sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Our ancient protectors, the great Titan beings, vanished long ago. We have no guardians now. The void comes for us and we cannot fight it. We can only create beauty and hope that it will be enough. Another pause. In the background, other Etherian voices could be heard joining in a harmony of fear and sadness. To those who might help us, we cry out for guardians. Send us protectors who can stand against this darkness. Send us those who can shield the innocent from the consuming void. We ask not for vengeance or conquest, but for preservation of life and light. Please, someone must come. Someone must help us. We are running out of time. The transmission ended with a final, haunting melody that seemed to capture all the beauty and terror of their situation. In the council chamber, many representatives were moved to tears by the Etherian plea. These were beings who had never harmed anyone, who spent their lives creating art and music. The thought of them facing something as terrible as the Void Swarm was heartbreaking. The humans will help them, Ambassador Kethvar said quietly. They must. None of them knew that the humans had already launched their response fleet. Ships painted black as space itself were even now accelerating toward the Etherian worlds. The crews aboard those ships had heard the Etherian plea for guardians and protectors. They were bringing neither. They were bringing something much darker. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Luna Station, staring at the holographic display that showed the Etherian territories. Red markers indicated where star systems had simply vanished, consumed by something the aliens called the Void Swarm. Intelligence reports painted a picture of an enemy unlike anything humanity had ever faced. Admiral, the emergency council session has concluded, reported Commander Torres, her aide. The Galactic Council has officially requested our assistance in defending the Etherian worlds. Chen nodded, her dark eyes never leaving the display. What's our response time? 4 days to reach the outer Etherian colonies with our fastest ships. The main fleet could arrive in 6 days. Too slow, Chen said flatly. By the time we get there with enough ships to matter, these crystal singers will be dead. Captain Webb, commander of the stealth frigate Shadow Walker, stepped forward. Admiral, we could launch an advance force immediately. My ship and 3 others could reach the area in 3.5 days. With what force? Asked General Martinez, head of Colonial Defense. 4 ships against something that eats star systems? That's not a rescue mission, that's suicide. Chen turned to face her senior staff. These were people who had fought in the Titan Wars, who had seen humanity's bloodiest conflicts. They understood what real warfare looked like, not the carefully controlled engagements that other species called battles. This isn't about rescue, Chen said coldly. This is about extermination. The Etherians asked for guardians, but guardians defend. We don't defend against threats like this. We eliminate them. Dr. Hassan, the chief science officer, activated another hologram. This one showed analysis of the Void Swarm based on long-range sensor data. Admiral, we're looking at something that operates outside normal physics. It doesn't just destroy matter, it absorbs it completely. Energy, mass, even the quantum foam that makes up space itself. It's not alive in any sense we understand. Everything can be killed, Chen replied. We just need to find the right way to do it. She moved to the tactical display and began highlighting ships and units. We deploy the 13th Expeditionary Fleet. Black Ops configuration. No mercy protocols. Uncomfortable silence fell over the room. The 13th was humanity's darkest fleet, designed for wars that couldn't be won through conventional means. They operated outside the normal rules of engagement, using weapons and tactics that other species would consider war crimes. Admiral, General Martinez said carefully, the Galactic Council expects us to protect the Etherians. If we deploy the 13th with their reputation, the Council asked for help, Chen interrupted. They didn't specify how we should provide it. Captain Webb, your advance force will consist of the Shadow Walker, Night Terror, Voidstalker, and Death's Head, all stealth frigates with full Black Ops loadouts. Captain Webb grinned, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Biological weapons. Everything. Antimatter charges, reality warping bombs, sentient viruses, and anything else we can fit in your cargo holds. You're not going there to fight fair. You're going there to learn how to kill this thing. Commander Torres looked troubled. Admiral, the Etherians are peaceful. They've never seen real warfare. If they witness our methods, they'll be alive to complain about it, Chen said harshly. That's what matters. The preparation took 18 hours. The 4 stealth frigates were loaded with weapons that existed in violation of every galactic treaty. Crews were selected from humanity's most hardened veterans, soldiers who had learned to fight without limits or conscience. Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of the Shadow Walker as his ship prepared to depart. His crew consisted of 43 men and women who had volunteered for missions that other humans wouldn't touch. They wore matte black uniforms with no insignia, except a small skull marking on their collars. Captain, reported Lieutenant Hayes from the weapons station, all special packages are loaded and secure. Biological agents are in containment, antimatter charges are armed, and the reality bombs are, well, they're very carefully not interacting with normal spacetime. Webb nodded. Communications, send a message to the Etherian homeworld. Tell them help is coming. The message was brief. Etherian Command, this is Captain Webb of the Human Colonial Defense Force. We received your call for help. We are coming. Prepare your people for our arrival. Our methods may seem harsh, but we will save you. What Webb didn't mention was that saving the Etherians might require destroying everything else in the system. As the 4 frigates departed, Admiral Chen was already preparing the main assault force. The 13th Expeditionary Fleet was unlike any other military formation in human space. Their ships were painted matte black and carried names like Inevitable Death, Final Solution, and Necessary Evil. The fleet included converted mining ships loaded with planet cracker charges, assault carriers filled with genetically modified shock troops, and hospital ships that had been retrofitted as biological warfare laboratories. These weren't peacekeepers or defenders. They were exterminators. Colonel Diana Vasquez briefed her ground troops on the troop transport Bone Reaper. Her soldiers wore armor painted bone white with skull masks that would terrify any enemy that could feel fear. They called themselves the Death Guard, and their job was simple: kill everything that threatened human interests. Listen up, Vasquez told her troops. We're going to fight something that eats star systems for breakfast. The enemy doesn't negotiate, doesn't retreat, and doesn't die easily. So we're going to show it what real predators look like. Sergeant Kim raised his hand. Colonel, what about civilian casualties? The reports say there are billions of Etherians in the target area. Our job is to save as many as possible, Vasquez replied. But if we have to choose between saving a city and stopping the swarm from spreading, we burn the city. The Etherians will understand or they won't. Either way, they'll be alive to make that choice. The briefing continued with details about weapons that most of the galaxy considered too dangerous to exist. Flame units that burned at temperatures hot enough to melt through starship hulls. Virus bombs that could sterilize entire continents. Soldiers whose bodies had been modified with alien genetics to survive in hostile environments. Admiral Chen watched the fleet depart from Luna Station. 67 ships carrying humanity's most terrible weapons and most ruthless soldiers. They were going to save the Etherians, but they were going to do it in the most violent way possible. Admiral, Commander Torres said quietly, the other species won't understand our methods. When they see what we're willing to do, let them be afraid, Chen replied. Fear keeps people alive. The Etherians asked for guardians, but guardians can fail. They can be overwhelmed or outfought. We're not sending guardians. She turned to look at Torres, and her expression was colder than space itself. We're sending demons, and demons don't lose. The transmission went out to all human ships. This is Admiral Chen to all units of the 13th Expeditionary Fleet. You are authorized to use any means necessary to eliminate the Void Swarm threat. No restrictions, no limits, no mercy. The enemy has chosen to threaten innocent life. Show them why that was a mistake. In the depths of space, the human fleet accelerated toward the Etherian worlds. Behind them, they left a galaxy that still believed in rules and honor in warfare. They were about to teach the universe that some enemies could only be defeated by monsters. The Shadow Walker dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Etherian system, and Captain Webb immediately knew they were too late for some worlds. Through the view screen, he could see empty space where two of the outer colonies should have been. Not debris fields or destroyed planets, just nothing. The Void Swarm had been here. "Captain," reported Lieutenant Hayes from sensors, "I'm detecting 3 Etherian worlds still intact, but there's something wrong with them. The energy signatures are twisted." Webb studied the readings. The crystalline cities that covered Etherian worlds normally glowed with soft, beautiful light. Now that light was dim and flickering, like candles dying in the wind. "Communications, hail the nearest world. Find out what we're dealing with." The response came immediately, but it wasn't the usual musical harmony of Etherian speech. Instead, it was a broken, terrified song filled with discordant notes. "Human ships," the voice sang with desperate hope. "You have come. The darkness spreads across our worlds. It moves like living shadow, consuming everything it touches. Our people flee to the deep cities, but the shadow follows. Please, you must help us." Through the static-filled transmission, Webb could hear other voices in the background. Etherian children crying in musical tones that sounded like breaking glass. Adult voices trying to maintain harmony but failing as fear overwhelmed them. "This is Captain Webb. We're here to help, but we need information." "How does this enemy attack? What are its weaknesses?" "We do not know," came the reply. "We are not warriors. We have never studied the art of destruction. The darkness simply comes, and where it passes, nothing remains. Not death, not ruins, nothing." Webb turned to his tactical officer. "Launch reconnaissance drones. I want detailed scans of the affected areas. And prepare the biological sensors. If this thing is alive, we need to know how it works." The 4 human ships moved deeper into the system, staying in stealth mode. What they found was worse than the reports had suggested. The Void Swarm wasn't just consuming matter, it was learning from what it absorbed. On the planet Harmony's edge, Webb watched through drone feeds as the dark entity flowed through Etherian cities like living oil. Where it touched the crystal buildings, they didn't break or melt. They simply ceased to exist, leaving behind smooth, empty spaces. "Captain," Dr. Voss called from the science station, "I'm getting readings that don't make sense. The swarm isn't just eating matter. It's absorbing the quantum information that defines how matter exists. It's unmaking reality itself." Webb studied the data. This was beyond anything humanity had faced before. The enemy wasn't just physically dangerous, it was threatening the basic structure of the universe. "New contact," announced Lieutenant Hayes. "Etherian refugee ship, heavily damaged. It's trying to escape the 4th planet." On the screen, they could see a crystalline vessel that looked more like a work of art than a spaceship. Its hull was cracked and flickering, and dark tendrils were crawling across its surface like living shadows. "That ship is infected," Dr. Voss warned. "The swarm is using it as a vector to spread to other areas." Webb made the hardest decision of his career. "Target the refugee ship. Full antimatter spread." "Sir," Lieutenant Hayes protested, "there could be thousands of Etherians on board. And if we let that ship reach another world, millions more will die." Webb replied coldly. "Fire." The antimatter missiles struck the Etherian ship, vaporizing it instantly. The dark tendrils writhed in space for a moment before dissolving into nothing. "Captain," came a horrified transmission from the Etherian homeworld. "Did you just destroy our people?" "I saved your species," Webb replied without emotion. "That ship was carrying the infection to your world. Sometimes saving lives requires taking them first." The Etherians fell silent, and Webb could feel their shock and horror through the communications link. They had asked for guardians, but guardians protected. What Webb had just done felt more like the actions of a predator. Over the next 6 hours, the human reconnaissance force mapped the swarm's behavior patterns. The entity was intelligent, adapting to threats and changing its tactics based on resistance. When Etherian ships tried to flee, it learned to spread faster. When they tried to hide in underground cities, it learned to dig. It's studying us too, Dr. Voss reported. Every time we scan it, it seems to become more aware of our presence. I think it's learning about our technology. Webb nodded. Then we stop studying and start killing. Launch the first wave of biological weapons. Target the main concentration on the second planet. The Shadow Walker fired a spread of virus bombs into the heart of the swarm. The weapons were designed to attack any form of organized matter, breaking down molecular bonds and disrupting energy patterns. For a moment, it seemed to work. The dark entity recoiled and parts of it began to dissolve. Then it adapted. Within minutes, the swarm had not only developed immunity to the virus, but had incorporated it into its own structure. Now it could dissolve matter even more efficiently. Well, Webb said grimly, now we know it can learn from our weapons too. The situation deteriorated rapidly. The Void Swarm, now enhanced with human biological weapons, began spreading across the remaining Etherian worlds at an accelerated pace. Crystalline cities that had stood for thousands of years were consumed in hours. Captain, Lieutenant Hayes reported, new contacts coming out of hyperspace. It's the main human fleet. Admiral Chen's voice came through the communication system. Captain Webb, report. Admiral, the situation is worse than we thought. The enemy adapts to everything we throw at it. It's not just consuming matter, it's incorporating our weapons into its own capabilities. Understood. We're implementing Protocol 7. All ships prepare for total warfare. Webb felt a chill run down his spine. Protocol 7 meant no restrictions whatsoever. Weapons that were banned throughout human space. Tactics that other species would consider crimes against nature itself. Admiral, Webb said carefully, the Etherians are monitoring our communications. They don't understand what we're about to do. Then explain it to them, Chen replied. Tell them that sometimes to kill a monster you have to become something worse. The main human fleet began to deploy around the system. Ships with names like Final Solution and Necessary Evil took positions around the infected worlds. Troop transports prepared to launch assault teams wearing bone-white armor and skull masks. An Etherian transmission came through, filled with musical confusion and growing fear. Human commanders, we do not understand your preparations. The darkness is the enemy, not our worlds. Why do your ships target our planets? Admiral Chen answered personally. Because your planets are infected. The only way to stop this thing from spreading is to burn out every trace of it, even if that means destroying everything it has touched. But our people, the Etherian voice sang with desperate harmony, millions of our people are still on those worlds. Some of them we can save, Chen replied. Some of them we cannot. But if we don't act now, all of them will die, along with every other living thing in this galaxy. The human fleet began its bombardment, not precisely targeted strikes, but overwhelming firepower designed to sterilize entire continents. The Etherians watched in horror as their guardians became destroyers, burning away the infection along with everything else. This is not protection, transmitted an Etherian elder, his harmonic voice filled with grief. This is annihilation. This is war, Admiral Chen replied. And in war, survival matters more than honor. As the human ships continued their brutal work, Captain Webb realized that they had crossed a line. They were no longer protecting the innocent. They were doing whatever it took to win, regardless of the cost. The Etherians had asked for guardians. Instead, they got something much darker, creatures willing to become monsters to fight an even greater evil. 3 weeks into the war, Colonel Diana Vasquez stood on the surface of Harmony's edge, watching her troops burn infected crystal forests with weapons that turned matter into pure energy. The bone-white armor of the Death Guard gleamed in the artificial light of their plasma torches, and their skull masks made them look like walking nightmares. The Void Swarm had adapted again. It no longer moved like flowing shadow. Now it could mimic the appearance of normal matter hiding inside rocks, trees, even the bodies of dead Etherians. The only way to be sure an area was clean was to burn everything to bare stone. Then burn the stone too. Colonel, Sergeant Kim's voice crackled through the comm. We've got another group of Etherian refugees requesting extraction from Grid 7. Vasquez checked her tactical display. Grid 7 was partially infected, but the swarm presence was scattered rather than concentrated. In the early days of the war, they would have attempted a rescue. Now they had learned better. Negative on extraction, she replied. Deploy containment charges around the perimeter. Nothing gets out. Ma'am, there are at least 1,000 civilians in that area. And if even one of them is carrying the infection, we'll lose everything we've gained here. Vasquez's voice was flat, emotionless. This is war, Sergeant. Make the hard choices or die making the easy ones. The charges detonated 15 minutes later, creating a ring of fire that would burn for days. The musical screams of the trapped Etherians could be heard even through the soldiers' audio filters, but none of the Death Guard flinched. They had learned to stop feeling, because feeling meant hesitation and hesitation meant death. In orbit above the planet, Admiral Chen reviewed the latest tactical reports. The war was going well, if success could be measured by the number of worlds cleansed rather than the number of lives saved. 7 Etherian systems had been completely sterilized, their populations relocated to quarantine stations where they would remain until the threat was eliminated. Admiral, Commander Torres reported, we're receiving complaints from the Galactic Council. They're saying our methods are too extreme. Chen didn't look up from her displays. Are they volunteering to come fight this thing themselves? No, ma'am. They're demanding we follow standard rules of engagement and minimize civilian casualties. Tell them to file a complaint with the Void Swarm, Chen said coldly. Maybe it will listen to their concerns about proper military etiquette. The humans had stopped trying to fight the enemy conventionally after the first week. Now they used weapons that the rest of the galaxy considered forbidden, reality-warping bombs that could erase chunks of space-time, sentient computer viruses that could think and adapt faster than any biological organism, biological weapons that attacked the very concept of existence itself. Captain Webb's stealth frigates had become hunter-killer squadrons, tracking down swarm nodes and destroying them with increasing brutality. His crews had volunteered for experimental procedures that enhanced their abilities, while making them less human. Enhanced reflexes, modified nervous systems, and implants that allowed them to interface directly with their weapons. Captain, Lieutenant Hayes reported from his modified combat station, we've located what appears to be a swarm coordination center on the third moon of Resonance Prime. It's heavily defended. Webb studied the sensor data. The Void Swarm had learned to create defensive positions, using absorbed matter to build structures that could protect its core functions. This particular node seemed to be directing the entity's activities across multiple star systems. How heavily defended? Webb asked. Enough to stop a conventional assault. The swarm has incorporated our own weapons into its defenses. It's using modified versions of our antimatter charges and biological agents. Webb smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. His face had been surgically modified to be more intimidating, with metallic implants that made his features appear skull-like. Then we used something it hasn't seen before. The Shadow Walker launched a single projectile toward the moon, a weapon that even Admiral Chen had been reluctant to authorize. It was called a null bomb, and it didn't destroy matter so much as convince the universe that the matter had never existed in the first place. The explosion was impossible to describe. It wasn't bright or loud or powerful in any conventional sense. Instead, it created a sphere of absolute nothingness that expanded outward at the speed of light. Everything it touched simply stopped being. When the effect faded, a perfect sphere had been carved out of the moon's surface. No debris, no residue, no trace that anything had ever been there. The Swarm Coordination Center, along with several million tons of rock, had been erased from reality. Effect successful, Hayes reported in a voice made harsh by his vocal implants. Target eliminated. Swarm activity in this sector has decreased by 60%. The humans were winning, but they were paying a price that couldn't be measured in casualties or equipment. Every victory required them to become more ruthless, more willing to sacrifice innocent lives for strategic advantage. On the refugee stations, the surviving Etherians watched news feeds of the war with growing horror. Their crystal cities were being saved, but the cost was the complete destruction of everything they held sacred. Worlds that had been centers of art and music for thousands of years were now barren wastelands, sterilized by weapons that killed the very possibility of life. An Etherian, elder named HFY, managed to get a communication through to Admiral Chen. His harmonic voice was filled with grief and confusion. Admiral Chen, we are grateful for your protection, but we must ask, when will this end? When will you stop destroying our worlds to save them? Chen's response was broadcast on all frequencies, heard by every survivor in the fleet. It ends when every trace of the swarm is eliminated. When we are certain that this infection can never spread again. When I am satisfied that the galaxy is safe. But at what cost? HFY sang desperately. You have saved our bodies but destroyed our souls. The worlds you cleanse are empty of everything that made them worth saving. Empty worlds can be rebuilt, Chen replied. Consumed worlds cannot be recovered. You asked for protection. This is what protection looks like when the enemy doesn't follow the rules. The conversation ended, but its impact rippled through the refugee populations. The Etherians began to realize that their guardians were something far darker than they had imagined. The humans weren't protecting Etherian civilization, they were preserving it by destroying everything that made it worth preserving. Colonel Vasquez received new orders that pushed even her hardened troops to their limits. Intelligence suggested that some Etherians might be willing collaborators, allowing the swarm to hide in their communities in exchange for being spared. The solution was simple and horrifying. Interrogate every refugee and eliminate anyone who showed signs of infection or cooperation. Ma'am, Sergeant Kim said quietly after receiving the orders. Some of these people are children. How do we interrogate a child for collaboration with an entity that doesn't negotiate? Vasquez looked at him through the eye holes of her skull mask. The same way we interrogate adults. The swarm doesn't care about age when it chooses hosts. The interrogations began immediately. Humans in bone-white armor dragged terrified Etherians from their refugee camps and subjected them to procedures that would have been considered torture in peacetime. Those who failed the tests simply disappeared, their fate never explained to the other refugees. As the war continued, the line between protector and predator disappeared entirely. The humans had become something that the galaxy had never seen before, a species willing to commit any atrocity in the name of preservation. They fought the Void Swarm with weapons and tactics that were more terrifying than the enemy itself. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the tactical display that showed their progress. 90% of the swarm's mass had been eliminated, but the cost had been enormous. 12 Etherian worlds had been completely sterilized, their populations reduced to a few million refugees who lived in constant fear of their protectors. Admiral, Commander Torres said quietly. Some of the crew are asking questions about whether we've gone too far. Chen turned to look at her aide. Torres had been with her for 15 years, through the worst conflicts humanity had ever fought. If she was questioning their methods, others certainly were. What do you think, Commander? Have we gone too far? Torres was quiet for a long moment. I think we've done what we had to do, but I also think we've become something that the galaxy will never trust again. Chen nodded slowly. Good, fear keeps people alive. When this is over, no species will ever again threaten innocent worlds, because they'll know what we're willing to do to stop them. The war was almost won, but victory would come at a price that would haunt the galaxy for generations. The humans had saved the Etherians by becoming monsters, and monsters were not easily forgotten or forgiven. The final battle began when Admiral Chen received confirmation of the Void Swarm's true nature. Deep space sensors had located its core, not a single entity, but a massive convergence of consumed realities twisted into something that existed partially outside normal space-time. It was hiding in what had once been the Titan Nebula, feeding on the quantum foam between dimensions. It's not just alive, Dr. Voss reported from the science station. It's aware, fully sentient, and it's been studying us just as carefully as we've been studying it. Chen stared at the tactical display showing the nebula. The readings were impossible. Mass that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, energy patterns that violated the laws of physics, and at the center of it all, something that radiated pure malevolence. How do we kill something that barely exists in our reality? Asked Captain Webb through the communications link. We drag it into our reality and then destroy it, Chen replied. Ready the reality anchor. It's time to end this. The reality anchor was humanity's final weapon, built in violation of every known law of physics and morality. It could force quantum entities to exist in normal spacetime, making them vulnerable to conventional weapons. The cost was enormous. The device required the complete destruction of a star system to power itself. Admiral, Commander Torres said quietly, the anchor will destroy everything within 50 light years. That includes 3 inhabited systems and the remaining Etherian refugee fleets. Then we evacuate what we can and accept what we cannot. Chen replied without emotion. Signal all ships. Maximum evacuation protocols. We have 6 hours. The evacuation was a nightmare of triage and impossible choices. Human ships worked frantically to load as many refugees as possible, but there simply wasn't enough space or time to save everyone. Millions of Etherians who had survived the war would die in the final victory. Colonel Vasquez led the ground teams on the evacuation ships, her death guard helping to maintain order among the terrified refugees. The Etherians no longer sang when they saw the humans. They simply stared in silent fear at the skull-masked soldiers who had destroyed their worlds to save them. "Colonel," one of her sergeants reported, "some of the refugees are refusing to evacuate. They say they would rather die than be saved by us." Vasquez looked through the viewports at the refugee ships. The crystalline beings inside huddled together, their natural luminescence dim with despair. They had lost everything: their worlds, their culture, their trust in the possibility of goodness. The humans had saved their lives by destroying their reasons for living. "Let them choose," she said finally. "We've taken enough choices away from them." Captain Webb volunteered to pilot the reality anchor into the heart of the swarm. His ship, the Shadow Walker, had been modified beyond recognition, half machine, half weapon, and completely deadly. His crew of 43 had been enhanced with alien genetics and cybernetic implants until they were barely human anymore. "Captain," Lieutenant Hayes asked as they approached the nebula, "do you think we're doing the right thing?" Webb looked at his tactical officer. Hayes's face was a patchwork of metal and flesh, his eyes replaced with targeting sensors that glowed red in the darkness. Like all of them, he had sacrificed his humanity to fight an inhuman enemy. "I stopped caring about right and wrong 3 weeks ago," Webb replied. "Now I only care about winning." The Shadow Walker entered the nebula and immediately came under attack from defenses that shouldn't have been possible. The Void Swarm had learned to create weapons from absorbed reality, launching projectiles that existed in multiple dimensions and could bypass normal shields. "Hull breaches on decks 3 and 7, Hayes reported. "The enemy is using our own antimatter designs against us." "It learned from us," Webb said grimly. "Let's teach it one final lesson." The reality anchor activated and space itself screamed. The weapon reached into the quantum foam and grabbed the Void Swarm's core consciousness, dragging it kicking and screaming into normal reality. For the first time since the war began, the enemy was fully present in their dimension, solid and vulnerable. The swarm's true form was horrifying beyond description. It was a mass of twisted space-time, filled with the absorbed remnants of countless civilizations. Webb could see fragments of consumed worlds spinning through its dark matter, Etherian crystal cities, alien technologies, and the screaming faces of billions of devoured souls. "All weapons, maximum firepower," Webb ordered. "Kill this thing before it adapts." The Shadow Walker unleashed every forbidden weapon in its arsenal. Null bombs that erased matter from existence, biological agents that attacked the concept of life itself, reality viruses that corrupted the basic laws of physics. For a moment it seemed to work. The swarm's form began to destabilize, its absorption abilities disrupted by the reality anchor. Then it fought back. The entity reached out with tendrils of pure entropy, trying to consume the Shadow Walker and add its weapons to its own arsenal. Webb's crew fought desperately to maintain their distance while pouring firepower into the creature's core. "Captain," Hayes shouted over the sound of alarms, "the anchor is overloading. If we don't disengage in the next 60 seconds, we'll be caught in the blast." Webb looked at the tactical display. The Void Swarm was wounded but not dead. If they retreated now, it would heal and adapt, becoming even more dangerous than before. The only way to ensure victory was to stay and die with it. "All hands," Webb announced over the ship's communications. "It has been an honor serving with you. Admiral Chen, the package is delivered." The reality anchor exploded, taking the Shadow Walker and the Void Swarm's core with it. The blast tore through the nebula like a wave of pure destruction, unmaking everything it touched. Stars went dark, planets simply ceased to exist, and the fabric of space-time itself was shredded and rebuilt. When the explosion finally faded, a sphere of perfect emptiness marked where the battle had taken place. The Void Swarm was gone, along with Captain Webb and his crew, 3 star systems, and the final remnants of Etherian civilization in the region. Admiral Chen received the confirmation of victory while standing in the command center of a hospital ship filled with refugees. Around her, the surviving Etherians wept in harmonies that spoke of loss beyond comprehension. They had been saved, but the price of their salvation had been everything they held dear. Admiral, an Etherian elder named Christel approached her. His crystalline form was dim with grief, but his voice still carried the musical tones of his species. "We must ask, was this victory worth the cost?" Chen looked at him for a long moment. "You're alive to ask that question. That's worth any cost. But what have we become?" Christel sang with desperate sadness. "We were a species of artists and musicians, builders of beauty and harmony. Now we are refugees in a universe that no longer trusts its protectors. You are survivors." Chen replied firmly. "You can rebuild your art and music. You can create new beauty. You cannot do any of that if you're dead." The conversation was interrupted by a small Etherian child who approached Colonel Vasquez. The child's crystal form glowed with the innocent light that only the very young possessed. In the musical language of her people, she asked a question that cut through all the political and military considerations. "Are you the good ones or the bad ones?" Vasquez removed her skull mask, revealing a scarred human face marked by years of warfare. She knelt down to the child's level and spoke in the simple, honest words that the situation demanded. "We're the ones who make sure you never have to find out the difference." The child stared at her for a moment, then reached out to touch Vasquez's scarred cheek. The contact was gentle, trusting, and it broke something inside the hardened soldier. Tears began to fall from Vasquez's eyes, the first she had shed since the war began. In the days that followed, the human fleet began to withdraw from Etherian space. Their mission was complete, but the victory felt hollow. They had saved a species by destroying its civilization, protected the innocent by becoming monsters, and ensured peace by demonstrating the terrible cost of war. The Galactic Council debated for months about the human actions during the Void Swarm crisis. Some called them heroes who had saved the galaxy from an existential threat. Others called them war criminals who had committed atrocities in the name of protection. Admiral Chen didn't attend the hearings. She had returned to Earth and requested immediate retirement from military service. When asked why, she gave a simple answer. "I have become something that the galaxy needs but cannot tolerate. It's time for others to carry that burden." The 13th Expeditionary Fleet was quietly disbanded, its ships scrapped, and its personnel reassigned to duties far from any inhabited worlds. The weapons they had used were sealed away in vaults that would hopefully never be opened again, but the knowledge remained. The galaxy now knew that there was a species willing to cross any line, break any rule, and sacrifice any principle in the name of survival. The humans had proven that they could be trusted to protect the innocent, but they had also proven that they were the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. In the end, the Etherians rebuilt their civilization on new worlds, creating art and music that spoke of loss, survival, and the terrible price of salvation. They never forgot what the humans had done for them, and they never forgot what the humans had done to them.